Jim Joyce.
Here we are. Wednesday, another day.
Dude, it really felt like weeks since, because usually you and I at least catch up briefly on Monday, not this Monday, and just been heck.
Yeah. I feel like you're riding this Clubhouse, like we talked a little Clubhouse last week, but you're riding the Clubhouse wave here. How's it feeling?
So I'll be frank with you, that first weekend, Marina couldn't separate me from it. It's like she literally, I don't remember if I talked about it, but she needed to hop into a room to tell me that, food is ready.
I was in one of the rooms with you.
That's right. It's a hit or miss. Honestly, I haven't been on. I think I hopped in. Anna, Maiques, who lives here, she hopped onto a room. Robin Wauters from TechEU was leading the session. So I hopped in because it's like respectable people that know the shit they're talking about. And otherwise, I found really, just wasting my time. Honestly, I'm over it. That's the short version.
Yeah, I kind of feel that way a little bit too. Although I saw some amazing stuff, like I saw I saw Naval on there. I kind of saw the repercussions of Elon Musk going on there, so that's pretty amazing. That was pretty so amazing. So it's powerful, but it does feel like, is it going to be, is it going to be a wave, or is it just, it's the only place you can do what they're doing, right? There's no other place you can do what they're doing.
No, I mean, and it hits all the points. I mean, let's see what happens with it all. But I'm definitely I'm back to my podcast listening on a treadmill or whatever. So I'm managing the time. One quick shout out, and I'm sure she will appreciate it. And you and I spoke about her. The power of this show, man.
Okay, talk.
I know. I'm getting everybody situated at the edge of their seat. So you've been told me that somebody I introduced you to who reached out, I have my serendipity calls, who stumbled on the two of us on the show. Right. I actually respond to people. No, I'm kidding. So Jillian Pierce, Jillian Pierce, who is just amazing. She impressed the shit out of me on that first call, and you had I'm sure, discussion. And she just started with you guys.
Yeah. So she's Health Beacon's Director of Business Transformation. And, we just appointed a role. She was so talented, so bright. She's running 2 huge launches for us, already. We went through an interview process, and she was using the show to kind of get a beat on Health Beacon and get a beat on how to approach the company. So it was absolutely phenomenal. And she's in her first week this week. She just looks amazing. Everyone's super excited to have her aboard. So thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you to the universe. Thank you to Eugene.
and actually, it was in her own hands. So thank you, Jillian, for reaching out to us. Or anyway.
Yeah.
Lastly, before we let our guest in, I just want to give a shout out. I don't know if we're gonna figure this out or not, hearing wise, but it was Michael Dillhyn's birthday yesterday. So awesome. He's an old man now, and I asked him to leave a little.
Yo, Eugene, what's up, my brother? Over the plane somehow. So.
Anyway,
so we got a happy birthday to Michael Dillhyon. Yeah,
yes,
little shout out to
I'm gonna actually have a drink, but in the meantime, let's let our guest in. Rebecca Love. I am super excited to talk to her. It's been ages.
She goes by Becca or Rebecca?
Hey. I'm sorry.
Hey.
Sorry, guys. I didn't know it wasn't on. How are you? Nice to meet you, Jim. I don't think we've had the chance to meet you.
No, we haven't. I just met you through one of your TED Talks or online. I just met you. I just was listening to you a few minutes before the show, but pleasure to meet you.
So nice to meet you. Hi, Gene.
And Rebecca, I'm sorry, I'm already drinking, but it's already 8 p.m. here, so I'm allowed, I think.
Oh, good. I have my coffee. Okay, we're good. This is good. And you're in Ireland, is that right?
Right. I'm in Ireland.
And are you still in Spain? Are you still over there?
Oh, we're in Barcelona. I'm purposely not sitting outside to make all of the people on the East Coast of US jealous of the weather. I mean, people might like snow as well. So
right, but where are you, Rebecca?
Boston. So we miss most of that storm, but I'm telling you, there is a massive amount of storm not far from here. Everybody is buried up and down the East Coast, so it is quite funny
I heard
to see
this.
what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah, just another thing to keep you inside. It's like kind of God throwing the snow at your door or something, right?
Thank goodness though, right? Because I have to tell you, like, the COVID cases are finally coming down in the US. I mean, you guys are killing us, like, across in Europe. Like, you guys are doing so much better than we are over here. But no, it's so good.
Yeah. We've got our moments. We've got our days, like a lot of things. We've got our moments.
Depends where. I'm still, I think we talked about it, but I'm still, wait a minute. Where's the C19 sign? Hold on. We didn't know the rule, Rebecca.
What rules? We miss C19.
So the way
the rules.
The quick rule is we don't say those words on the show, even though it is reality outside. This is like our
bubble.
The situation's safe space. So
is our safe space.
But
yeah, because it's really a self-management issue, just so we don't talk about it the whole time, you know.
Exactly. I like it.
I do remember, and we wanted you to introduce yourself to others. So you and I obviously met, and we'll reminisce of the good old conference days. But I'd love for you to kind of take us back, like, who are you? Like, introduce yourself.
Yeah, so good to know. Well, hey, Rebecca Love. I'm a nurse practitioner by training. I spent most of my young career, growing up in the side of academia, frontline, primary care as a nurse practitioner, ventured into the world of entrepreneurship. And then the world changed when I went to a hackathon with I wanted problems in healthcare. And that's sort of when I dived into the path of exploring worlds of healthcare hackathons and how can nurses be empowered to bring great solutions forward. And stepped into the world of putting on a first nurse hackathon, developing the first program of nurse innovation and entrepreneurship at Northeastern University, and then spinning that out now into a large scale nonprofit across the United States that's spanning a couple continents at this point in time to focus on elevating nurses to the forefront of healthcare innovation. So that's
awesome.
Nursing side, so it's awesome.
We're gonna have to peel the onion a little bit. And by the way, I don't know if you guys caught it. So for the audience, I had another completely different question, and I couldn't remember what the hell I wanted to ask you. So I jumped to the introduction.
What's the name of the nonprofit, just for the listeners?
Yeah, it's called SONSIEL, the Society of Nurse Scientists, Innovators, Entrepreneurs, and Leaders. I sort of
awesome.
I don't know if you guys do this when you go around and you do New Year's resolutions. I was lost for one, and all of a sudden I went for a long walk. The sun broke through the clouds in the middle of a New England day, and this name came to me, and I was like, do we need another nursing association? And I'm like, we don't. There's 800 of them in the United States alone. We don't need another one. But I keep listening to those voices in my head. You guys are in that world, right? You listen to that sign, something keeps on telling you, and the world just works. When things are meant to happen, I think they fall into place, and that sort of did for the organization.
So I don't know about you, Jim, but I'm already getting my shot of energy. And that's what I was going to say earlier, that you've been a big fan from the beginning. I think you were sort of commenting, and I think you even texted me saying, love what you guys are doing. Sorry it took so long, but I just, no excuses, honestly.
And I have a few things to admit here. So first of all, nurses are my favorite people in the world, probably like yourself. So I start there. So my first company that I launched was effectively a nursing company. That was how I got into entrepreneurism, where I built out a nursing system that we were trying to empower. In Ireland, there was a lot of really good clinical practices that nurses weren't technically allowed to do. And so we were challenging a lot of that, and the legislation was changing. And so that was kind of where there. And then
I love Ireland. I spent some time there actually exploring if American nurses could work there. So I love what you guys have done with your system. And also, I mean, you have just such a different scope on midwifery and everything along those. But I didn't know that's how you started this entire venture into entrepreneurship. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was a company. Now I'm not a nurse. I'm not a nurse by training, but that was where I saw the opportunity, was giving nurses. And I was just listening to your podcast, but let's hear more about you before I ask you.
Yeah, let's peel the onion a little bit, because honestly, I think in any startup pitches, you can squeeze anything in 30 seconds. It's amazing.
Isn't that what you're supposed to do? I think that you have that moment when you're a nurse and you're training and you get 20 seconds with the doctor and you have to explain 6 patients, who's the most urgent to see and why you need their attention on those. So I think that it's just a way of survival in the world of nursing. And I think that's how we learned how to prioritize, tell the most important, because nobody's going to listen after 10 seconds anyway, right?
It's a good thing. Yeah. We'll listen. We're here. We got all the time in the world for you. We got nowhere to go.
So maybe just like I am going to reminisce because I'll be frank with you. I do miss some of the conferences. So I remember, I think, sitting with Shawna Butler, another amazing nurse at XMed, Daniel Kraft's event. And Shawna's like, come, you got to meet Rebecca. And I literally got that shot of energy right there. And it was middle of the day in San Diego, right? So do you miss it? I know, like, do you miss getting out there? Do you miss, that serendipity?
I think all of us that thrive on human interaction, COVID has been so hard for. And I think what's the hardest thing is that as much in this virtual world, there is nothing like showing up at a conference. And C19, in the C19 world, there's nothing like human to human interaction when you show up at a conference and you're sitting next to somebody that you had no idea was going to be this person who just sort of moonshotted your way of thinking to a different place. And I think that's what was so great about XMed, right? You go to these conferences and that it breaks down those barriers where events like this happen, but you get filtered, right? You get filtered by what's the title, who's the email, what time did it come in? And at conferences, serendipity, which I think is just the point of all of our lives, right, has been removed from the current environment. So I miss it desperately. I don't know how you guys are managing it, but obviously you're managing it by doing this incredible podcast, right, and bringing all these rock stars on.
Yeah, we're like a self-help bubble for each other. That's how we're managing it, and then we're trying to bring people like you to kind of boost us up midweek. That's pretty much our strategy.
Yeah, I need this, right? We all need it. I totally agree.
But tell me, so the thing that Eugene and I, and we cover this topic a lot, we probably kind of bore our Joe Rogan style volume of listeners here, but it's the space. I think that's what I'm struggling with, is the space. So like I find like how do you create that space for thinking laterally, in the efficiency of this going video to video to video to video means that it kind of crushes you. So if you want to think a little differently, I think that's what it's crushing a bit for me.
Yeah, and I don't know if you guys are looking at 2021, but I think that the first conferences that we're looking at aren't possibly going to happen until August at the earliest, and if those are going to go off or not, I don't know also what this whole intercontinental look of travel is going to be. And I think what we value so much is that you can sit in your bubble in the United States and you can have great conversations, but where the magic happens is when people from around the world show up and they give you different perspectives, and it changes the way you're having the processes that you're dealing with. And I think that one of those things those conferences do, like XMed and Singularity, and those ones that really disrupt the status quo in terms of your way of thinking, is they welcome these different kinds of individuals to get on planes and spend 8 hours traveling for a day and saying, hey, it's worth showing up, because I don't know about you, but I've met people at those organizations who've transformed. I've done projects with them, and just from meeting them for an hour, sitting like this, sitting and having a conversation, suddenly 6 months later, they're like, can you help with the project? Can you build this out? Like, there's amazing things that happen when you go to events like that. And I'm not sure if the world's working the same way without those events happening. Are we having that kind of connection?
Up until about a week ago, and before you jumped in, we were talking about Clubhouse. I thought Clubhouse is it. This is my serendipity, which to a certain extent, I think I'm still finding that. I just spending a lot less time on it now. And actually,
are you on Clubhouse?
It's an invite. I hear it's an invite only. I had a whole bunch of nurses email me saying, we can't get invites into Clubhouse. How do we get nurses into Clubhouse? If you guys have the way in.
We'll hook you up.
We're in.
We'll hook you up.
We'll send it to you right now. We get you in. Clubhouse needs you. Clubhouse needs you. You and Elon Musk.
Yeah. Which I don't know if you tuned in. I did, but anyway.
Okay, so Eugene, I don't know where you want to go back to the beginning. So you're what's happening, just to jump into it. So like what's going right with nursing? What's going wrong? Like, where do you want nurses to play right now in this whole kind of digital health space? And what are you trying to get done?
Yeah, so I think that what's happening in nursing today is unprecedented challenges, and we've talked about this before, but I don't know if you guys know some of the statistics, but in the world, there's 18 million nurses. There's 4 million nurses in the United States alone. And if you quantify that, there are more nurses in the United States than any other profession, any cab driver, police officer, fireman. We're the largest population, not only in healthcare, but in any working one. And in 2020, we were already facing the largest retirement that the United States was ever going going to face in nursing, the largest exodus. But we saw a speed up of the amount of people retiring and leaving the profession. So in the United States alone, we're facing about a 1.25 million nursing shortage that they believe now is going to hit us at the year 2025. They had projected that at the year 2030. If you were to go online right now, there are over 900,000 openings for nurses in the United States right at this moment. But I think the challenge is, thank goodness, and they call it the Fauci Effect. I'm guessing you guys are having it in Europe, that it's inspiring people to go back to medical school, go back to nursing school, become scientists. I mean, what a great thing, you know, we're not just having a whole bunch of people like my kid want to be football stars, right?
Epidemiologists were like this, and it's kind of,
yep.
We need that to happen. I heard the same thing happened after The Sound of Music. They had a whole enrollment into the people that wanted to be nuns. Enrollment into nursing school. The great news is we're seeing that happen, but what we don't see in most of these other professions that we're seeing in nursing is nearly 50% of new graduates that come out of nursing school in the United States leave the bedside within 2 years of practice. And it is a unprecedented, staggering number of nurses who leave the profession, and nobody talks about it. So we graduate 250,000, 195,000 of those disappear from the bedside. I think there's a lot of issues that go into this, but the biggest one I think is when you start off as a nurse, your first day of your career, you're handling the same level of acuity as nurses with 30, 40 years of experience. 2 years in, the average increase of salary is only on average 1.5% year after year. You're working a day, night, holiday, weekend rotation. When you make a mistake, you've potentially killed somebody, and you're looking at your friends 2 years out of university who've had 2 promotions. They're working 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. They're getting some bonuses. You're looking at your life of day, night, holiday, weekend rotations, thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing next. And I think what we've always looked at, nursing is a job, not a career. And what we have never done is facilitated career pathways for nurses in the profession.
Right.
So I think a number of barriers.
So it's kind of, I think when you look at your career, like my sister is a nurse out of Boston, and I'd say Susie Joyce, or call like my sister out, but actually no, Susie Devitt, she's married. So we just saw this incredible growth in her. Like, she was someone that, went through school, and not to make it about my sister, but she had dyslexia. And so they kind of thought, so academically, she was always challenged, and I was quite frustrated. And then, figured that out later on in life, went back to school in nursing, and she's like unbelievable, like this kind of genius level medic, operating the system. But I would look at her and I'd say the burnout, that was always what I felt was like, the like you said, the stress, physically, moving people around, dealing with people in an emergency room, that stuff that stress level seemed to be huge.
And on top of it all, I mean, so aside from the physical work, right, there's all this administrative stuff, right? Because my understanding, docs don't want to enter stuff in, and and actually, as it touches your coach, Marina has been meeting, and I know we've spoken about this a while back. We have, I'd say, 5 to 7% of our registered health coaches on the platform are registered nurses, who basically said, you know what, we can no longer help patients inside that system. We're going to go outside of the system and try to help outside, right? So it's just...
You guys know McCarthy over at Microsoft, and I think she came to XMed one year too, and she was the chief nursing officer of Microsoft. She's had a huge promotion, and I remember I was sitting on a panel with her at some conference, and she said, I think we all wish that we could just blow up healthcare and start over, right? And I think that we feel that way being in the business of healthcare, but when you really get to those frontline workers, they're living an experience that's so broken. Like, nurses are doing on average 27 workarounds a shift, and are in 28 different places or something over the course of an hour. So they are constantly innovating in a highly inefficient environment that nobody seems to be able to fix. So they're living, insanity day in, day out without any ability to fix it. So to your point on what your sister saw, I'm sure that just the physical stress and the emotional and everything that goes on, but then there's these inefficiencies that drive us crazy from the healthcare business perspective. But when you actually put it into practice, that becomes exemplified, and you live that over and over and over without being able to fix it. And I think that's the challenges that we're seeing, that nurses are burning out. Brilliant nurses.
So you want to turn them into entrepreneurs?
I'd like to turn them into innovators. I think that
I
was just on, we've been running these hackathons for nurses, and I was just on. It takes about 18 months from one of our hackathon winners to get to a business. And I remember the founder of this company said, man, innovation is so different in entrepreneurship. And I think that that's the things, but I think what we're just hoping is we can get nurses' voices to be heard, so that somebody recognizes the brilliance, like you said your sister had, the brilliance that she has, and to hear her to say, hey, here's a problem and here's how we want to fix it, and not just do a task.
So innovators. So and then okay, so what happens? So so they're seeing all these problems and saying, why can't they just fix it? And they're going into that environment. So how's that going?
Well, I think it's not like Google or Amazon or any place that you guys probably work where they come and they say, hey, here's a problem, here's how we want to fix it. I think they keep it hidden. And I think that's why part of this burnout happens. I think that the value of nurses are seen as task drivers, right? Here's a list of tasks that you have to accomplish. We want you to stay by the bedside. Here's a list to keep patients alive. And when they come in and they bring in these new ideas, I think that the focus by so much of management is on the day-to-day in front of them, that they can't see that if they clarified this problem, it would create a lot more sustainability. But as you guys know, the idea that a nurse can take an idea all the way from simply an idea to a product and then actually get that adopted into healthcare, you guys know this, you've been in healthcare innovation and entrepreneurship. It's nearly impossible, right? So how do you help nurses who have been taught the language of caring and bedside and empathy, and they haven't been taught anything on business, right? So when you ask, and your sister probably does this, and your loved one, you guys are coaches, right? They speak in the language, I think this, or I feel that, right? But you guys know what that means when somebody comes and says. So I would love to hear your perspectives of, where do you guys see the role of nurses in healthcare? And why are we having this conversation? Why was that important to you to have a conversation about nursing today?
Oh, so yeah. It's awesome. But go ahead, Eugene. You go.
Go. I keep interrupting because I have a delay here on this side.
Yeah, no, you go. Eugene, hit it.
Honestly, for us, as Jim said, was just to bring in an awesome person who is full of energy and also a very important propagator of nursing profession. And I think I've always said it on kind of in my previous roles, right? It's sometimes you don't actually need to talk to the doc, just talk to the nurse for adoption, right? I mean, that's been a lot of my feedback to the startups that are actually pitching to, hospital systems and ACOs, et cetera, talk to the nurses. So for me, because we do have a lot of listeners that are startups and VCs and et cetera, I think this is super fascinating to hear it. And I was actually going to ask, but I don't know, Jim, if you had something around, like you mentioned nurse hackathons, right? Like, so what happens? What's that process? Because you said like from hackathon to something is like 18 months. Just walk us through a little bit. I'm curious.
Yeah, and Jim, we'll get right back to you. We'll answer this one question. So we were really lucky. After I went to my first hackathon and we launched one in the nursing space, we had no idea if anybody would buy into this idea that nurses could innovate. So we were really lucky, and I don't know if this is okay, but our partners, after we spun out SONSIEL, is Johnson & Johnson, pivoted their 15-year campaign of thanking nurses to recognizing that the future of nursing really should include innovation. So a woman by the name of Linda Benton, happy to connect you guys, basically reached out and said, please tell me that you're not going to leave this behind. Because what we saw happen to nurses who experienced a hackathon was not only a difference that they saw that they could make an idea into solving a problem, but they saw a transformation in themselves unlike anything I had ever experienced for nurses. They felt like they were heard and valued and appreciated, but more importantly, that they could do something with it. So after we started SONSIEL, we've been running now twice a year hackathons, and Microsoft came in as our most recent partner. So we do J&J and Microsoft and biannual hackathons with hundreds of people virtually, and it's fantastic. And they form these teams. And to your point, what is that gap? So you guys know when you meet innovators, there's going to be people that you meet that are going to go the distance, right? Being an entrepreneur is not for the faint of heart. You guys have both been there. Starting anything is nearly impossible to do, but to really get to that point that you're going into business and have a product to launch, an 18-month time frame is allowing, so hackathons, whole bunch of strangers show up. They don't know each other. They spend 3 days incredibly formulating ideas. They love each other. And then the business sets in. Who's putting in money? How are we doing an LLC? What's the name of the company? Things fall apart quickly, right? So a lot of the teams shake out. It's those that formulate and continue together. And about 18 months later is where we start to see the proof of their hard work, the stumbling, the LLCs, the products are ordered, and that they're going to market. And that's about the cycle we're seeing from hackathon to, for nurses at least. And we're seeing a very strong number of nurses actually starting companies from these hackathons, which I think is relatively unusual for the market of hackathons nowadays. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to just correct you one thing. Starting something is actually very easy. It's going that literally the next step. I still have like 47 domains that are cool as hell as an idea.
100%. Yeah, no, starting's not the problem. Yeah. For some people, starting's the problem. That's not for me. It's not the problem.
I like that first part. And then I'm like, who's going to sustain this? So Jim, what are you thinking about all this?
So no, I think I'm totally fascinated by it. So, and I have to be careful about when I was thinking about how the nursing innovated in the Irish setting. Actually, there was a minister of health that came in named Mary Harney, who's now on the board of my company, and she changed the legislation that allowed, that introduced nurse prescribing. And I had built a company up that allowed IV administration to happen, but there was actually technical rules in place, or perceived to be, that didn't allow a nurse to kind of independently, cannulate a patient or something. So, so I witnessed that whole thing. And what I found interesting, I think you're so onto something, but it's about that growth, right? That career path and that growth. And then I also think the way the training works is, it's a real vocation, right? It's a real vocation. And there's, it's almost accepting that there should be growth in that vocation, and that you should move through cycles in that vocation. And it's not necessarily just a manager, or just doing something that I think what you're onto is something really interesting. If they think about that, like in all of us, is growth, like what you do in the first part of your nursing career, and how do you do that piece, and different pathways to growth. So I think for me, that's what it strikes me when I talked about working with be very careful about introducing innovation. I had a team of 50s. If I so I had to be very, very careful, because they were so, and this is a broad sweep, but they were so sensitive to the patient circumstances and making sure that they could deliver on the service in a way that they were that was so centric to them. So any little tweak or any little innovation had to be very carefully thought through. And they were that's how I felt about it. So I think this idea that kind of allowing them to change and allowing to think of something different. And then I like this idea that you're thinking about is how do you move from that initial kind of inspirational vocation into other areas? Like we, doc to digital health and playing a different role, right? And I think, we've seen other like ancillary healthcare professionals of, physios and moving in. And I really feel that maybe nursing's underrepresented in digital health, Eugene. I don't know what you think.
I would think so. I mean, there's, I don't know that many startups in the space even. I'm sure you do, Rebecca, but I mean, I'm just thinking like intelligent health. I think that's one that's I've heard recently about, if I'm not mistaken. It's just kind of, helping nurses find opportunities and vice versa.
So I don't know, that's I'm not sure if I'm adding anything to the conversation, but I think this idea of vocation and this idea of like, if you can give them different pathways that might light up a different thought of how they could think about their career, like your own career. Like, first of all, where are you from originally?
So I'm originally from the Midwest, but I had a company that got acquired by a company in the UK, actually. And so I had spent, and I worked in the British Parliament, so I've spent a lot of time in the UK.
Oh my gosh.
Which was fantastic. I love it all, but nursing was a second career choice. And to your point, I think that nurses are taught, and it's really, and Shawna Butler says this all the time, and she sums it up so well. In nursing school, we're taught two things, and we're told no all the time. Don't kill patients, don't harm patients. So follow protocol, procedure, and policy at all costs. And so we're almost beaten out of us the idea of thinking differently. And that is such a fundamental challenge, because when you get into the hospital floor and everything is not working correctly, you sort of do the best that you can. You try to innovate with what you have, but you get in trouble when you do so. So we then bury it further. So I think the question is, I mean, that's where I think hackathons sit so beautifully, is where can you allow nurses to safely experience innovation if they can't do it on the floor? And hackathons, I think, are that perfect spot to allow them to identify and flourish and do it in a safe space. Because obviously we don't want everybody to run off and just say, hey, I think this could work for that patient, but let's be honest. In a place with C19, for example, one of the things that nurses did that they could do under their scope of practice, which is position changes, it was nurses who first started to flip patients onto their abdomen so that they could breathe better. This is counterintuitive to everything we ever learned in nursing school, but because we knew that the only thing that was going to happen next was to intubate a patient that had C19. The reality was, as we flipped them, suddenly the nurses started to see pulse ox going up dramatically, and that is what has really, changed an entire mechanism of treatment. So what I think we're seeing here is that there has to be some flexibility within the ability of nurses. And to your point, no, they're not a lot in the digital health space, because nurses in the United States, at least, you cannot bill for any nursing services. So we're as valuable to the healthcare system as basically a chair or a bed, because we're rolled into the room rate, which seems as strange, but who makes all the money for the hospital? The physicians, the physical therapists, the occupational therapists, because insurance will reimburse for them. So our profession has basically been treated as, hey, you're just a commodity. You're basically adding to the services here. You don't have any value on your own. And because we can't charge or bill for anything that we actually do, there is a lack of incentive by healthcare institutions to reinvest back in nursing, putting them on a career path and seeing their value in other places outside of the value that they add to the room as being another nice piece of furniture.
But, I never knew this, by the way. This is like eye-opening for me. Can you guys hear me okay? Today is just a bad connection.
Get you now. Okay. Get you back.
I was saying I never knew this, so I just learned this now. I just assumed, but I guess part of that is, as we go towards kind of value-based systems and, really tracking the outcomes, nurses are absolutely a key component of that, right? Like, how do you underinvest, because that's who's actually working with the patients many more hours throughout the month, a day, a week, whatever.
Are the people by the bedside managed care, the 25 minutes a day a physician is not by the bedside, right? We keep you alive. We recognize the change in statuses. We manage all of the care. We do all the medications, all of the treatments, all of the position changes, all of the assessments that need to be done to keep you alive. And I think what we've done very poorly as well as nursing is we don't quantify or explain what our value is. And I often find myself even catching people like, what do you do, Rebecca? I said, well, I'm just a nurse, and in front of anything, it downplays what those roles are. And I think because we do so much, what we can't say is, hi, I'm a surgeon, I go in and I replace knees and I do heart valves. We as nurses are a jack of all trades, and because of that, our skill sets have not been able to be quantified or easily expressed by what the value is we bring to that bedside. And again, being tied to no economic trackers means that the value and the impact that we have on health systems is not measured accordingly to the value that we actually bring. So if you guys can come up with a solution to that, there's been one or two examples that we're seeing in the US market where this has changed. We're being able to charge now for certain kinds of education, diabetes support, things like that. But largely still inpatient settings, there is no ability to quantify the actual ability of nurses' value in healthcare.
So I have an idea. As I know, these are level 3 CPT codes still for health coaching, but I think every nurse should become a health coach, and then that will be actually billable and by the system.
You have to disclose your interest in health coaching.
I mean,
Yeah.
Well, this is big.
Yeah, no, listen, come apply for a job to Health Beacon. My company, I think for nurses out there that are listening, I also wonder too, is the system, I'm just wondering, Rebecca, is money, it's funny when you come over and you talk to, about the clinical problems in Europe, you actually very rarely see money being advanced as the primary, but you talk to anyone in the US, it's always money and codes and, and that's the specificity of charging for it and that association. I think that, I wonder too about the heterogeneity. I think maybe, what you're seeing and you're unpacking as you see this innovation is that, when nurses, when they come through and they're kind of classified and you have these structures in place, like these, in a not, where it's the union structures or that kind of approach where it's just we lobby as a group, we compete for something as this, whereas they're all individuals and you going on and in wanting to, spark innovation and travel to the UK and build your career very differently. You see there's so many, and in nursing is so different and different, an emergency room nurse versus one doing an IV administration and one that goes into surgery or one that goes into prescriptions, all the breadth of that there, that I feel like it's almost like a break away from these structures feel like they might be quite compressing, in terms of allowing someone to kind of grow themselves, that's what I would feel like. There's almost, don't cross the picket line, kind of philosophy that I feel exists, or am I wrong?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that there is, and I think that how nursing has been treated, and I think we're seeing this with anyone, is that next generation isn't going to accept the same kind of conditions or opportunities that the last generation was. And in all honesty, I think as we see the rise and women and having more opportunities in the workplace, because nursing is still 95% women and female. As those women start to get opportunities in other verticals, right? Nursing is in the 1970s and 1980s, even into the 1990s, really women still had a limited career path, right? There was glass ceilings everywhere, and nursing was one of those.
Teaching or nursing, or it was the common professions.
Yeah, exactly. There wasn't a ton. I mean, we could, and that we saw them break out and do that. But still, nursing was the if you were going to have a career as a woman, nursing allowed you to have a family, be a mother, and sort of the same, still into the limitations of your gender, right? I think. Look into the 2000s, women are breaking out of those molds, saying, the role of the mother is very important to me, but I can also be a CEO. And that limiting factor is where nursing seems attractive, that I can work 3 days a week and this allows you that benefit and you can still be a woman. I think some of that is changing. And I think the next generation of women behind us are going to say, look at it, that's great that I'm by the bedside and doing, med surg for 2 years, but no, I'm not going to, I don't know if you know this, but they also cap nursing salaries out at 20 years. You can't get more pay. I think that the next generation of women are going to sit there and say, I don't believe in these glass barriers. I want a career advancement. I want somebody to invest in me like I'm investing in them. And they're going to start pushing the envelope and redefining those. So I think we're going to see a generational change.
The pharmaceutical industry, I think that's been a real career path. I see huge levels of senior executives with nursing backgrounds, all the way through from entering medical science liaison roles all the way up through. I see lots of, that seems like that's been a big outlet. I don't know.
Well, look at Rebecca, right? I mean, not in pharmaceutical industry directly, but with OptimizeRx, right? You're leading there. So what brought you there, actually?
It's really interesting. A conference of all things is where I met the CEO, who was the name of Febbo. And he, to your point, we sit outside of life sciences company, and it was a small meeting of healthcare leaders. And in these conversations that we were having about transformations of population health and how can we strengthen the role of healthcare and digital health along those lines, again, in those conversations that we were having, I would bring up the points. Here's what we see in the hospitals. Here's what we see in nursing. And he approached me and he said, Rebecca, I don't have a clinician clinician on our team at OptimizeRx. And I think this is what we see a ton in healthcare, all these rock star digital technologists coming together to solve this industry. And then they bang their head against walls because the doors don't open, because they don't speak the language or understand the breakdown. And Will said, hey, could you join our team and give us the insight of what speaks to clinicians? And in the last, I've only been with the company a little over a year now, but it's been transformational to look at and oversee products and engagement, and then also conversations of where we should be going on the clinical front. And I think that if you're looking at digital health, and you're a digital health company, I think for a long time, and especially in the 2000s and going forward, you may not have needed a clinician on your team, right? I think though in the last 3 years, healthcare systems have become a lot more savvy. They're no longer just willing to work with companies that supposedly have the best tech. They want you to also have the clinical knowledge to be able to work with their system. They're not going to spend the time educating you as a health system anymore with all the gaps that you need to know. And I think that's a fundamental transformation. So I was very lucky to join a team, but and having that experience in business and having it, I sort of bridged that gap. And I think that's, to your point on digital health, I think for companies that are going to go forward, if you think you're going to be effective entering healthcare without having some kind of clinical focus and being able to enter health systems or payers or any kind of market, you're going to need to have the clinician out there speaking that language.
The market matured, right? I mean, the entrepreneurs matured. For some are, second, third time entrepreneurs in this market, right? So I think it's a fascinating development. Oh, and then there's SPACs buying up some of these assets. I'm going to keep saying SPAC until I'm all SPAC'd out, but
yeah, but also that I think one of the great feedbacks that I get from the nursing from a digital health perspective is that kind of user acceptance. What's the word I'm looking for? Kind of that feedback around the technology, that the nurse seems to have a unique perspective, and I think it's driven by that need to be highly efficient and work very versatile. And they're kind of like, they're the last person the patient sees as they leave the hospital. So they're in charge of the discharge. They're thinking about it. They're wondering, will the patient, follow through with that? Will they be successful? The clinician, like you said, danced in and danced out of the room. And, but the nurse is staying with it. So they kind of look at that device and they're going, yeah, there's no way that 80-year-old woman that I just saw in the emergency room is going to wrap that around her chest and hit it 3 times a day.
And the font and the coloring and everything that user experience. I don't know if you know this, but literally nurses are the end user of nearly every medical device on the market. I mean, there's so if you are building a digital health company and you think, this is going to be used by hospital systems, and you don't think who that end user is or going to be the person who recommends it, nurses provide all of the education, all of the referrals, all of the recommendations for patients constantly in every vertical. And that's not, and I think it's this transformation of healthcare, hospital to the home, which is absolutely the future of where healthcare is going. Who is going to be that person that stands between technology and the patient? It's not going to be the doctor. It is going to be the nurse. So I think there's two things, like how do we educate nurses enough to understand that they have a role with technology? Because I have to tell you, our education system is decrepit and ancient in that vertical, right? We get thrown into the job with all of this new technology that we've never been trained on, and they quickly have to adopt it. So I think that there's what we failed to do in nursing is to educate correctly, and also I think that leads to some of that burnout, but also we haven't created those systems by which they can continuously educate to elevate and move into these other areas. So talking to people, you and Eugene, and you see the world at where it could be if we had this exponential mindset, if we could really work together in these things. So the questions is in this world of what we're doing, how are we, where do you think healthcare is going? And I think that that's some of the question that we see it as nurses, but I don't know if we have a good clarity of what does the rest of the world think where healthcare is going. So where do you guys think healthcare is going to be in 3 to 5 years? And what is the role of the nurse in that?
Unfortunately, 3 to 5, I think, is going to be very much the same with some incremental changes.
Yeah,
I looked at my business plan for a consulting company over 10 years ago or something like that, that I started, and I looked at the business plan, and the same words that I had in there are still relevant today about healthcare
Right.
specifically, right?
Yeah,
So.
I mean, I think probably pinging off of what you said, Rebecca, like, I think that to be a clinician in any sense of the word, you know, whether that's maybe, you know, Eugene will, you know, health coaches will be classified as a form of, you know, clinical intervention and support, and, you know, wherever that is, you have to be a technologist. So I think that's going to be so fundamental. It's like, I feel like that's going to be probably one of the biggest changes that happen. And I think, you know, we've seen that kind of come in, that you know, if you're a brilliant oncologist and you were living in Ireland, for example, as you know, there's a limited supply of oncologists, you know, you didn't have to do a video appointment. People would drive at any point in time to come see you. Yep. So now they've all had to do video appointments, and now they get it. And so their lives have moved to dealing with the technology, and how the technology works or runs becomes essential. So it feels to me like that idea that a clinician would come in and say, I'll just be the clinician and I won't understand the technology, or I won't be able to get it, that seems to have gone away. So I think the people side feels like it's going to be in order to flourish in that environment, you know, they're going to have to do it. And, you know, if you look at that million nursing shortage, that, you know, that million, like, how is that gap going to be dealt with? You know, you could make the career of nursing more inspirational, or you can make it more expansive, you know, or you could improve the efficiency of it, right? So you don't need the million, I don't know, you know.
I was just gonna say that, you know, this whole like squad thing reminded me of, like, you know, Best Buy is maybe positioned the best with the Geek Squad, right? That every nurse is also going to be a member of a Geek Squad, because they have to know a lot of these tech tools, right? So, but anyway, listen, I'm the timekeeper. I mean, we can make it as long as we want, and I'm enjoying the heck out of this. But I don't know, any. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I love the question. I'd love to ask you to leave us with this, like, so advice for nurse innovators or entrepreneurs, you know, what's your advice for them?
So it may sound self-serving, but we would love you to join SONSIEL. But the truth is that as a nurse innovator, the world is going to, I just was talking to somebody about this. A reporter had called me about one of those nurses that had made it. And he said, why would they make it? What did you recognize in them that was going to make you recognize that they were going to be successful? And I said, I've met hundreds, if not thousands, of nurses who've wanted to innovate and be entrepreneurs. And the thing that stands in the way of every entrepreneur that doesn't make it is that lack of confidence of getting to somebody to get to yes. And to me, it doesn't matter what your degree level is. It doesn't matter where you went to college, if you did not do that. What really matters is your persistence and that vision that you have. And I think that if there was something that I could tell the nurses out there, is that you're going to get more no's than you're ever going to get yeses. The people are going to think you are crazy, and you should own that as a badge of honor. And if you really believe in it, it's not going to be an overnight process. Invest in it. It's going to be 3 to 5 years before you see a glimmer of hope. And one of the best quotes that I heard is that being an entrepreneur is either you're killing it or it's killing you. And that's the ride you go through every single day as an entrepreneur. So if you're not getting killed by it, or you feel like you're killing it, then you probably need to go and make sure that you're living it to be that excited about it. So that would be the advice that I would give to a nurse who wants to explore this.
I don't think I've ever heard that. If you're killing it or it's killing you. This is fantastic. It's definitely making into the notes.
Definitely. That's awesome. Yeah. So I hope get people to join. That's fantastic. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And if you're viewing or listening today, apologize for really bad connectivity on my end, and since I'm recording, but otherwise press the subscribe button and get a shot of Rebecca Love.
You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Cheers.
Thanks, Rebecca.